Welcome back to Stickboy's Lab. I'm Stickboy. Got my buddy Brian running the camera, playing music, and doing other stuff around here. Glad you joined us today. Today what we're going to do is we're going to be working on this WPL C24 Hilux again. And our project for today is to put a roll bar in here. It won't be a full cage. Just a loop behind the cab and then some kickers. I'll be building it out of 3/16 brake line. This is the nickel copper stuff. It's very easy to form. Should be fairly easy to solder as well. I'm going to be soldering it with regular plumber solder. I get pretty bad fume fever off of brazing stuff, and silver solder is insanely expensive right now, so we're not going to do that. We're going to go as cheap as possible. So one of the things I did in preparation for this, if you've watched my other videos, is I shortened up this toolbox lid to give me a little gap in the corners. There's a lot of guys who just mount them into these peg holes here. I decided not to do that. So I left a little gap here by cutting my toolbox lid down. And I also put some holes in the corners here. Now I started out with a burr in the Dremel and carved away a little bit of that. And once I got it started, I took another piece of brake tubing. Focus! But I carved a little bit of a bit into the end of a piece of brake tubing and put it in the drill and spun it really slow and let it carve down into there. Worked pretty good for me. Results may vary for you. I have the piece of copper brake line. I'll get that shoved down in there. And I want to make a little mark about right here where the cab bends. And I'm going to make an attempt to freehand this. And hopefully it goes okay. So here I have a piece of decorative box that one might have around their house for special occasions. I'm going to set that right up here. And I'm just going to trace around the cab, sort of, to give me a suggestion of where I might want to go. Now I know this is not going to be accurate because it's much wider, but it will give me kind of something to guess at. So here I've set up a little bending jig on a 1-2-3 block, and I have this template here that I'm just using to check my angles against as I bend. We'll see how this goes. So I'm lining up my mark with the center line of this row of holes, and we'll check it against a little bit more. Hopefully my corners don't get too loose on me. A little bit more would be a little bit better. That's looking pretty good. So I'm going to take my Sharpie again, and I'm going to make a mark up here about where I want this bend to be. And I'm really just guessing. Back in the bending jig, make sure this is sitting. And we'll pull that bend. Looks like this particular bend is getting a little loose on me. And that tubing just kinked on me. So that method is not going to work. I'm going to have to come up with some better way of bending that. Stay tuned. We'll come up with a better plan. So we're over here at the roundy round tool. And I've got I've got a 1/2-inch carriage bolt here. Just going to chuck that up. And we're going to carve a little groove in there that we can use as a die. I have a round file. I'm just going to rough it out with whatever I happen to have in here to start with. And we'll go from there. That's looking okay, but a little deeper would be a little bit better. That's looking pretty good. Well, that kinked just a little bit. So here's my first attempt at my first roll bar loop. It is a little bit loose. The fit on it is not great. The height turned out okay. I got the legs coming down okay, but if you look straight in the back, you see the bends are not nice. They're just kind of loose and lumpy, and I think I can do better. And it may be I have to switch my material or make a better form that it can be formed around or something. So after attempting to make a couple of roll bars with the brake line, I was not happy at all with the kind of bends I was getting. They were just kind of loose and floppy and not crisp. So I switched over to this 3/16 inch solid brass rod. I'm able to get much better corners on it, and I'm a lot happier with how it's turning out. So here's a loop that I've made. I'm going to turn around here and show you a goofy little bending jig I made. Here's the bolt that I turned in the lathe the other day. I'm still using that for a die. Here is a follower piece. So I drilled a 3/16 hole through here and then drilled a 1/2 inch on the center line of that 3/16 inch hole and cut a groove in there. My work stop here is kind of goony and should probably be replaced because it's just a couple of pieces of shim, and this one's getting mushed already right there. So how this works is this gets placed here and the bolt comes up through. Excuse my lack of camera skills. And then you can see where that sits. Here we have a piece of brass rod in place. It's sort of a floppy setup. It's very crude, but it does work fairly well. It gives a nice crisp corner, and then you pull this end around. It should have a little bit of a handle on there, but it's enough for bending this brass. This brass bends pretty easy. So that's how we're bending it. I could have probably come up with something far easier, but it's given decent results. So I attempted to bend it this way with the brake line, but that was still doing really loose, sloppy bends, and I didn't like the way it looked at all. So you can see I've cut a piece of brass rod. It's going to get in, soldered in here for a cross member. I may end up hinging my toolbox lid off of this cross member instead of off the stock hinges. It may just be a better solution for what I'm trying to do here. So now I'm going to go over to the vise and put a little fish mouth in these things for a nice fit up on the tube. So here we have our rod clamped in the vise. You can't see it probably, but I have a black line drawn up the side of it so that I can get both of these lined up. I just have a round file, and I'm just going to put a little fish mouth in here. And we're going to stop right there with that end. I'm going to flip it around, line up my line again, and do the opposite end. I'm going to take it off, do a test fit, see what it looks like. I'm going to pull this out this time. Might be able to slide it in from the end. that'll work. I'm happy with that. Have to solder that in place yet. I've wire brushed and fluxed both these joints. I'm just using regular 95.5 lead-free plumber solder. If you look here, you can see this solder joint is all nice and clean. Just about as perfect as you can get for a joint like that. This one here is a little more glooby, but we can clean that up. So here you can see my roll cage jigged up and soldered. I didn't show you the soldering process because I forgot. So you're left out again. These vice grips here, they're just here for a heat sink so they don't melt the body while it's sitting there. I don't yet have these feet soldered on, but that shouldn't be too big of a deal to do afterwards. I'll pop these vice grips off of here. And we'll pull this out. And that's how it sits in there. That is a pretty porky piece of product right there. It is fairly heavy with that solid brass. That's why I wanted to use the tubing, and it's the one thing I really don't like about what I'm doing here. And we'll work on getting this jigged up for soldering. Well, here we go. We're going to make an attempt to solder these on. They are all tinned up. And we'll see if we can get enough heat into these guys to make it happen. Just a little bit too hefty of material for the soldering iron to take care of. Torch solders it up beautifully, but you end up burning a lot more things. We're going to claim those are both bonded. Looks like they might be. We'll go stick it in the snowbank, see how it fits. So here's what it looks like. In place with the toolbox in and the cab on. So here we are over in the spray booth. And we'll flip them back up. And we'll call that painted. Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode as we built the roll bar for the C24 Hilux. It was a lot of fun. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Maybe it will encourage you to build a custom piece for one of your RC vehicles. It's been fun. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. And as always, play nice.